is buffer time? What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
Hello, Buffer Timers. We are back. It is Sunday. It is 2 p.m. and we are here to talk about, well, some stuff that happened with Trek that we weren't sure we should go over given that the strike was on at the time. Let's see. This week is the Strange New Worlds episode. I believe it was episode 6, Lost in Translation. Before we get to it, we're going to go around and introduce ourselves, of course. I am Scott of the YouTube channel Opinions No One Cares About. I have climbed the Black Mountain. I have fought versions of my father. I have met the giant koala. It turns out his name is Steve, actually. And he said that while it was not my time yet, we all shall fall.
I can't follow that up. I mean, I vacationed once at the Black Mountain, but they sent me home for being too much of a coyote, right? Anyway, I am a space hippie because I like to hang out with some very cool engineering type people, and my name is Dell.
My name's Vanessa, and I love Bad Star Trek. That's the name of my channel. Yep.
Nice.
And I'm Dustin from here on Best of Trek, Worst of Trek, and Scotty up here is gonna host fresh off the Black Mountain.
It's an experience, let me tell you. Okay, so I made the mistake of not rewatching this episode, but if I remember correctly, it's all around setting up a new dilithium refinery, and for some reason, Pike has been promoted to fleet captain.
For just a minute.
For just a minute, yeah. So the first question we got here is, does the whole fleet captain thing make any sense just to satisfy canon? While breaking that same canon later in the season by Kirk meeting Pike several times. Now, personally, this does kind of hit home because I'm on a TOS rewatch for reasons relating to my channel. And as it happens, the next video I'm going to put up about it is part 1 of the Menagerie, which is where Kirk said that he met Pike when he was fleet captain. Nice little coincidence there. But what do you guys think?
I have given up on trying to maintain any sense of continuity in Star Trek, full stop, period. Like, so much stuff has been redone and reworked and like Mariner's 38 now, and
At least.
Because
31.
But still, like the whole continuity of it, like I wasn't real good on keeping with linear time, and then Deep Space Nine happened where there were long periods of non-linear time. So at this point, I've just given up on all understanding, and it all happens today. This is what's happening today.
I think a lot of what happens in Strange New Worlds hinges on retconning in general. So this is just another one on the pile because they're encountering the Gorn, that like a Gorn is a known enemy, and in TOS that's not really the case until Arena. So also, Spock and his relationship with Chapel, and maybe that's not retconning, but it's definitely a reimagining of what led up to him and to Pring falling out. So, there's a lot of retconning. So I don't really see it as like, it stands out to me. Like, honestly, this is a pretty minor retcon compared to what they've done in the past. So I'm fine with it.
I find it weird just because they then break this canon later. Like, if you're going to break the canon, fine. I don't really care about that. But to like try to save it here and, we're going to promote you to fleet captain for about 5 minutes just to satisfy one line from 60 years ago, but then break it later by bringing Kirk back several more times. Well, one more time.
And I'm willing to bet that there's a large part of the Strange New Worlds audience who has no idea what that reference is to, or they don't remember, or so it's easy to kind of just slip it under the radar and let it go.
Yeah,
honestly, I thought it was
just a throwaway line.
It feels like plot convenience, and it doesn't really connect meaningfully to anything except this episode and that other thing you mentioned for TOS.
Oh, could you almost say it was planned? Because I can't help but remember, like, we saw Kirk multiple times before this episode, when the real Kirk showed up, because they were all different, it was, well, not all different, but it was at least 2 different alternate timeline Kirks. So they did that, and then they do this to say, oh, no, this was the real first time that Kirk met Pike.
Well, and I also felt in this episode in general, it was one of the first ones where I really felt like Kirk was shoehorned in and actually took plot time away from actual characters on the Enterprise. It comes and goes. Sometimes I don't mind it. Sometimes I really hate it. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. But I would like it if there were less Kirk in general, because it's not Kirk's show. He had a show. Let us see Pike, and I'll put up with Uhura and Spock because we're exploring them. But this is just, hi, I'm Kirk. I'm going to stand here and try to be all Kirk-like.
I mean, there's a couple reasons that he's there, and those reasons are the emotionality of the episode of certain characters. So it's like they have Sam Kirk freaking out. They have, the security officer recognizing him from her sort of parlance with him romantically or whatever. So it's like, that's really the only purpose he serves in this episode, I think. Oh, yeah. And he's the one white guy that believes Uhura, which, yeah.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Not wrong.
Okay, so yeah, back to the plot. They're at this dilithium refinery. It's got to get all set up and stuff. And then Uhura starts having hallucinations. And also, there's the whole deal with she's watching what it counts to basically YouTube videos of Hemmer showing her how to do stuff. So, do you feel like Bruce Horak got more screen time than, say, Pelia this season?
If
It
you
feels
count
like it's at least
Space Rhapsody, then yes.
Yeah, not necessarily Hemmer, but Bruce Horak in general. He got some screen time for a dead engineer.
And a zombie engineer at one point.
I loved that zombie makeup, though, because it was still highly recognizable as being Hemmer, but it was this grotesque interpretation of what an Anar would look like. And at the same time, through all of that makeup, he has to express the thank you and this was a good thing that you did while looking like a drop dead zombie. And I thought that was that's something that not every actor can pull off.
That's true.
I don't know, Scott, I think you were with me when we actually interviewed Bruce.
Yes. Dustin, were you there for that one?
Yeah. So he's a very kind gentleman. So I just was delighted to see him. That was really the highlight of the episode for me, was actually getting to see Bruce Horak again, because he said that he wasn't done with Star Trek, but we just didn't know in what capacity he was talking about, and obviously he couldn't say. So seeing this was really lovely.
What I'll say about the zombie stuff is that I think you guys know how much I hate Cat's Paw. Star Trek has tried some Halloween episodes, and I don't think they've worked. And this one's not directed at Halloween, but it's one of the best things you could watch as a Halloween episode of Trek, I think. Really good makeup, and it's like Scooby-Doo, kind of scary for about 5 minutes.
Right.
Well, I mean,
I jumped the very first time I saw Zombie Hammer.
I don't know if I would put it up in the same category as Cat's Paw, because Cat's Paw doesn't involve someone getting shot out of an airlock by their own volition. That's that's a little more goofy, scary. Also, there's the fight, and also the episode of TNG where you see the corpses sitting up in the morgue or whatever it was, and that was really creepy. But this
Night Terrors.
Night Terrors. That's exactly the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. So those two, those two episodes have a lot in common with this one. but the visions and the point of the visions was much it actually like tied into the plot a bit better with this. It's like it's just such a slow burn that the meaning isn't obvious until the very end, even though us as Trekkies have seen this premise many times.
Very true. What do you got, Gannon? Craziest thing this episode for me is how negligent Pike was in it. They knew Uhura was tripping. They gave her a fully armed phaser and had her track down another crazy person.
Yeah,
Damn.
it did seem at some points like why are you still letting her do anything in this situation?
When Kirk and her parted ways, and he kept checking, like, are you sure you can handle it? And she's like, yes. No. If anyone was negligent, it's Kirk. If you're going to wedge him into an episode, at least let him, like, keep someone from making really, really dumb mistakes.
That is true. But also goes into, like, the next question. Like, why did he believe Uhura, whom he had just met and who had also just punched him out?
Yeah, this is the biggest part of the episode that just does not work for me at all.
My answer would be plot contrivance.
Well, it was her diagnosis of, like, oh, you're completely out of it, was sort of rushed too. M'Benga just said, oh, you just have deuterium poisoning. Oh, you're just really tired and overworked. You should go rest. And nobody was listening to anything she was saying about what she was seeing, or like, and you're in space, like, there's a high probability there's things connected to what's outside of the ship in the ship. Mm-hmm. And it's not unheard of for people to receive messages from aliens. So it's just like they just...
Go ahead.
I just loved when he listed the symptoms, like headache, nausea. It's like, that could be 1,000 things anyway.
That's a Pepto-Bismol commercial.
I thought something that was kind of interesting was that that Dr. M'Benga was so quick to be like, oh, you're just tired. And the thing is, if you mention to a doctor that you're having even what you think might be hallucinations, they're going to ask you more questions. They're going to try to ascertain whether it's a mental health issue or if it's an exhaustion issue, or maybe your calcium is too high. You never know. Lots of different things can cause auditory and visual hallucinations. And he didn't even go down that path. He was just like, oh, you're overworked, go home.
I guess he thought he ran a full diagnostic by her being on the biobed, maybe. But that just seems to be, for how distressed Uhura was, that seemed to be very not, it just didn't seem very thorough, a diagnosis. And like, also just, yes, Kirk getting punched in the face and arriving to the conclusion that, oh yes, this is a believable person. Like, that's their very first interaction, and that's the conclusion he draws.
Well, he met her in the bar.
Right. Okay, so we met her in a bar once. That's not enough character background.
Right. Yeah, I know how to talk. It is a little odd that, this is Star Trek we're talking about, and M'Benga didn't even consider an alien aspect to these hallucinations.
Well, I mean, there are other aliens that we know of that use telepathy.
Uh-huh.
Like a bunch. And not once did the word telepathy even come out of anyone's mouth.
Yeah, let's see. We know aliens communicate by telepathy, aliens who communicate by metaphor. That one in TNG where, like, the ambassador himself or whatever didn't talk. He just had a group of people, like a Greek chorus, to talk for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They had the mentalists who could bring up memories by going into your head and finding memories. They've had, the Binars alone are another species that speaks in a way that must be translated because it's so foreign it doesn't get picked up on the UT.
I mean, if we're going back in time in the show, not necessarily time-wise, the cage itself has aliens that communicate in a very unconventional way. So it's like, for M'Benga to go, yeah, you're nuts. Just go to sleep. That's pretty dismissive.
Okay, but anyway, so yeah, what do we think of these alien creatures who communicate via hallucination?
I don't think much about them because there really wasn't enough about them. So
That is true.
again, this comes to like I just said before, that last bit was the worst part of it. And this wrap up after doing a deep dive into TAS recently. This is how a lot of the animated series episodes end. Like, you get some decent action and some fun stuff, and getting there is half the fun. And then it just kind of resolves itself without any input from anybody. It's just like, oh, well, that was what we needed to do. Great. And it just wraps
Indeed.
up within seconds. And I didn't like it. So I can't tell you anything about whether I like these aliens or not, because yeah, we saw like them trying to speak to Uhura through her pain and mental anguish about Hemmer, which is weird.
But there are people who are out there in the world today who believe that they can communicate with, we'll say, imaginary beings or non-corporeal beings, and that they're getting, whether it's the answer to prayer, whether it's hearing something in the middle of a ritual that brings your memory back. There's a lot of human conditions that we believe in today in which something we can't see communicates with us through metaphor and what we would say is a hallucination or a vision. And so the fact that that's not even brought up as a possibility, that maybe she is having a religious experience that helps her come to terms with all these deaths in her life. Like, I went back and kind of watched the highlights in that frame of mind, and the episode started to make a lot more sense to me. I don't know. Kind of like it.
I would just question the efficacy of zombie Hemmer being a mode of communication, or or one of the officers shooting themselves out of an airlock as a mode of communication. Like, what are you meaningfully saying to anyone? Like, all you're doing is creating fear and paranoia on the ship, and what does that accomplish? You know, like,
it doesn't accurately translate to "we're dying."
Right. Like, so like going back to Night Terrors, like Deanna saw like this it was really goofy. Like, she was flying and they were saying one moon circles, like it was a hydrogen atom. So there was like something to decode. But with this, it's like she's in a field. She sees zombie Hemmer. Like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it could be that they're trying to beef up what Uhura is in the crew? Like, because the old Uhura, whose name is escaping me, didn't really like get a lot of plot lines thrown at her, and there wasn't a whole lot of character development until you got into the movies. And so this made their way of sort of beefing up her backstory and giving her more to do, especially having the communications officer figure out that they're being communicated to via hallucination. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, the fight. The thing is, like, it had equally, and what's funny about the fight is it had equally useless visions, because he was seeing his grandfather and he was just arguing with his granddad about taking his medication. It's like, what is the point of this?
Haphazard development.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with anything.
Right.
Let me jump in there for 1 minute. Ancestors is a very big deal. And now we know Chakotay, not a real American Indian, didn't follow any single American Indian plotline ever. It was the guy who was there. The guy who talks about being Native American was a fake. But the idea of looking at whether it's your alive or dead ancestors and seeing the fact that they were batshit insane can scare the fuck out of somebody. I mean, I didn't have kids because both my parents were maybe not batshit insane because they had me, and that was the best part. But like, they weren't sane people, so I'm not going to do that to a kid. But I do live and have lived my life being really afraid that I was going to turn out crazy like them. So that part I get with Chakotay, but like in a way it's sort of like here too, in that like she's dealing with death rather than madness.
Yeah. I think it
But
comes
what
down
is,
to. Go
but
ahead.
what is he trying to say? What does the vision say meaningfully from the aliens to the recipient of that message? Because what does the arguing with your grandfather about taking medication, even though he's dead? It's like, if you're gonna have a vision quest in that episode or whatever, wouldn't you like have a discussion about like, okay, now I'm here, let's try to figure out what this means, and not just get wrapped up in the emotion of it in that moment.
Right. Yeah, what it comes down to is it's an interesting idea for aliens, but it's not very well executed. Because all we really know is that apparently they live in deuterium and they communicate badly.
Yeah, what
Well,
I'll say about
they were
the
attached to the deuterium. They weren't living in it. It was like they got their dimensional atom. Like, what did Sam talk about when he was in xenoanthropology? He was saying like, man, I can't remember now, but they were talking about it in xenoanthropology.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'll say about the similarities between the fight and this, for one, the fight for me is Voyager's worst episode. This might be Strange New World's second worst episode, even though it's better than the fight. It's got better scenes, it's got better moments, but honestly, it makes even less sense when it comes to the aliens and their telepathy, and they are not direct in any way, shape, or form. At least in the fight, it's like that's the whole thing about these aliens. It's what did they call it? Not strange space, but we are too strange for you is what they keep telling Chakotay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where like, yeah, up is down and you never know actually where you are. Oh, chaotic space. That was what it was called. So that was like, it had more to it that made sense than this one, and that's hard to do with Voyager's worst episode. So
Yeah, and
You're
like,
saying that that's worse than Threshold? Really?
yes,
Really?
absolutely, 100%. The
Wow.
only good part about that is Booth.
Hot takes on Buffer Time today.
That's okay, because I consider this one to just be slightly better than Charades, if we're gonna rank episodes. But go on.
I really enjoyed, at least in the salamander episode, there was mention of pizza. So someone said pepperoni, and that was nice to hear about. It was a nice distraction. But like with this, there's really nothing entertaining aside from the plot to make it redeemable. Like the main plot is actually the weakest part. It's all the things, all the connective tissue, the emotionality of the interactions between the characters that have nothing to do with the plot that are actually the highlight. Not, and also like there's been episodes where Uhura has stepped up as communications officer in a more effective way than this one, because they just discredit her from the beginning. They just don't believe her, and then she's like having to spend the episode trying to convince people, yes, I'm actually seeing things, and this is important to communicate. Right. And that really, it was what Cassandra in the Odyssey or something, like telling everybody something is going on, and nobody believes her anyway.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, you mentioned the interaction between characters. That was actually something I wanted to get into. Of course, I lose questions now. So how do we feel about the Kirk brothers dynamic? It kind of gets explored a little bit more in this one.
Yeah, I mean that's like a medium point to the episode. It's okay. It's serviceable. It fills in their backstory a little bit and their history. Yeah.
How old are Sam and
Well, Kirk's like 34 when he takes over the Enterprise, so he's got to be like right around 30 here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sam is like older, I think, by a couple.
I always
years.
assumed older, since he's the one named after their dad, and you generally do that with the firstborn.
I just have a hard time thinking, and maybe this is just me. I have a hard time believing that both of these people that are well accomplished in Starfleet, even though like one's a bit further ahead, are that obsessed with what their father thinks. That is like, it's like this. I mean, they're like in their 30s and they're still like, oh, is dad proud of us? Like that's something a teenager would focus on and use as like a point of contention. I don't
No,
know.
there's definitely people like that. I
I'm
know
about to
people
say
like
I'm
that.
50 years old and both my parents are dead, and I still worry about how my mom thinks about me.
Oh.
Like because she did put a lot of effort into making me the way I am, and so I don't want to let her down. And she died many years ago, and I still worry about it.
And presumably in canon, I think their dad is not only still alive at this point, but there was that line about how, like
Yep.
he was, before Jim came along, he was the youngest first officer in Starfleet. And so there's a legacy.
Yep.
I guess like would they? I guess okay. So being proud of like having the pride of your parents, sure, but like competing for it so aggressively and thinking that you're just a completely worthless in your father's eyes compared to your like the fervor of competition in this stage of life is hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Right.
I could see a writer behind a laptop making a not at all veiled metaphor with the idea that people don't take scientists and other medical personnel that aren't doctors. They don't take them as seriously as someone who's in a big flashy leadership role. Even when we're talking about like CMOs, and they're not treated the same way and with the same respect as someone in the same rank, but who wears a gold/red shirt, depending on what era we're talking about.
Right.
But like that's what mostly like Starfleet does a lot of the time is to explore and do like surveys and stuff. So like that's another thing that I think is odd about Star Trek in general is this weird like scientists are useless, but we need science to do what we're doing. Like,
right.
Huh?
Oddly enough, I feel
when
like
was the last time we saw an episode where the solution was found in like stellar cartography? They were like, oh, we have figured out the nebula. Like everything's great and no one's going to get hurt. Like it's always the command personnel on the bridge who are figuring everything out. And if they have a science officer, it's not usually, I think Spock is the most well-respected science officer.
There it is.
Maybe,
yeah.
Why am I blanking? The Vulcan from Enterprise. It's not T'Lyn. T'Pol. Maybe as valued as a science officer, although I don't remember if that was her official term. But like, I would love to see, kind of like the original Lower Decks episode, I would love to see a bunch of scientists with no command personnel, like solve an issue. I think the closest we've gotten is some stuff on Discovery because they put so much more effort into like the spore drive and all that stuff. Maybe
there is the episode with Wesley Crusher. I think he's like managing a science team.
Yep.
I think that's another one of those.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it should also be noted, I mean, like the big three, once you get to TOS, you might have a guy in command, but then you have the science officer and the doctor. So it's at least 2/3 science going there.
Yeah, and also like Spock is sort of a weirdo in the canon because he's a first officer and science officer because Una was, written out of the show. Right. So that's it's sort of like an incidental double role.
Yeah.
Okay, we have all of two more questions here, and one of them I think is a little bit more important than the other. So let's start with this: is Uhura way off base for hating cookies in this episode?
If you're not excited about cookies, I mean, who are you?
You have a machine that can make any food that you can think of, and if it doesn't already have the recipe, you can tell it how you like it. if I don't want a cookie, I'm gonna go to my replicator and be like, give me anti-cookies, please, or whatever it is
Well,
that I want. Why should other
in
than the
this
fact
era
that
you
were
don't have a
really vain-
replicator. There's
Yeah.
there's protein resequencers, and we
Oh, that's
saw
right.
we saw that when Spock tried to make coffee in the episode we're going to talk about next week, Klingon coffee, and that didn't work super well. It's like it's not a perfected thing, and it's not a replicator at this point. So you do still have the ship's galley, and you're still beholden to what the ship and the what they're putting together that day.
What is the opposite of a cookie in terms of dessert? Like what is the opposite?
Ice cream. It's not
It'd
solid.
be something
Black
tart,
licorice?
I would think.
Oh yeah,
Black
maybe
licorice, yeah. Licorice dry.
Ugh.
Oh, I like licorice, but I'm weird.
I like black licorice too,
Have you had the salted licorice from like Scandinavia? It is
but no.
to me it is a step above because it's much more organic or whatever. But yeah, it's like black jelly beans. No, thank you.
Oh, come on. You can't go for the black licorice and then not go for the black jelly beans. No.
I think that's how I started liking licorice, was that nobody in my family wanted to eat the black jelly beans. So I got to be able to go through the whole bowl and just pick out all the black ones and have them all to myself.
Nice.
So I think that's maybe why I like licorice now.
Okay. Like this is why I sort like my Skittles by flavor. I just can't stand
Frick,
artificial
yeah.
grape.
Mhm.
Oh God, yeah, I'm so with you there. I can't either. I can't do it with that or artificial strawberry.
They taste exactly the same to me. All the Skittles are like just barely different. They're like the replicated little pieces that you see on like TOS. Those like
Little cubes.
multicolored things that are probably exactly, and it basically all tastes the same to me.
I kind of agree with you. Like they do have a little difference in taste, but all of them have kind of like a citrus tone to them.
Huh.
I predict you're typing something about tasting a rainbow. Oh, nope.
You know, that would have made more sense. Okay.
What's that
So
last bit?
save this question for the last because I kind of figured this is kind of the most important. This episode is, I think, in most of our opinions, middle of the road at best. But did they play the first meeting of Kirk and Spock right?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, it's very casual, and I guess that works really well. At the same time, them like it I don't know.
It
It's
felt like a
serviceable.
moment to me. Like it really felt like a moment where you were supposed to sit and be like, okay, this is happening now. But
Right.
it didn't feel entirely organic. It felt a little bit of like, hi, I am Kirk. Hi, I'm Spock. We're going to have a long history together.
Well, I think it's the fact that like we know that from canon.
Yeah.
That means it's that so that it helps that this isn't like overdone. It wasn't like a dramatic sting or like they like saw each other and like I don't know, they zinged or whatever that is from Hotel Transylvania. They're just meeting each other.
When you meet the love of your life, you don't always know it at first glance. So I think this is a deliberately understated yet important moment in Trek history for sure.
Yeah. And we're just looking at it with eyes that have seen all the history that comes from the fact that these two are best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
more
Like,
if
technically, their future, but yeah, it's like it's. I enjoy the sort of like implication that we know how important they are to each other, but at this moment, they're just two people in a bar, just like Uhura and Kirk were in a bar. But and that's all he needs to establish trust. All he needs is that, so you can punch him in the face and he'll be like, "Oh, you're solid, you're fine. You didn't mean to do that."
Right.
I think if you look at Kirk as a composite character of all the Kirks, punching Kirk in the face could be a good thing to Kirk to be like, all right, well, this is a hot potato. Like, you know what I mean? And not in the way that he's trying to hit on her, because he's not. But it more just like, okay, I like her spunk. I like her gumption. Like that sort of feeling to it.
You've got spunk. I hate
Yeah.
spunk.
There's also that episode of TOS where they're all on that planet with the flowers in their face, the spores or whatever, the way of the spores, but it's not called that. And Spock punches Kirk in the face after Kirk says a bunch of racist things to him. You know, that's tight. That's a tight relationship that I could withstand something like that.
To me, it feels like they probably wrote this aside from this episode and decided, hey, this episode's so weak, we're going to end it like this. Because it punches the episode up a little bit. It's like, oh, well, I'm not sure what I just watched for the last 45 minutes, but hey, there's this nice moment. Hooray.
I really didn't like the amount of emotional distress that Uhura endured through this. I felt like it was just like, it reminded me a lot of TNG where the women are just sort of like the lightning rod for pain for an episode.
Well, at least it wasn't like Troy.
Right.
It wasn't that bad, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, she wasn't crying out and passing out.
Right. Like, make it stop. No.
Yes. That was exactly the one I was thinking of.
So Gannon has an interesting question for us. It's a little bit of a challenge. He wants to know what Trek species that really needs to have a comeback and get a spotlight.
The Breen. Please, more Breen. I want those little dirt devil faces back.
I'd love to see more clarification on that, like, whole thing that Wayun brings up, that like, oh, their planet it's really nice and hospitable. Why do they wear the refrigeration suits? Because.
Like, why would you live in a place where you can't be naked at all, ever? Never nudes. They're never nudes.
Yes.
My actual answer to Gannon's question is the lizard babies. I want to know that they have like created a colony and evolved on this planet, and that like Janeway and Tom's children are just, they are killing it. They evolved some awesome stuff.
Oh, brother.
I would like to revisit. I don't remember what name they had because it was only one episode. But when Loaxana falls in love with a man who's 60, so he has to go home and die. I want to know way more about that civilization and like, does everyone just off themselves at 60, or is it an existential crisis? Like, I don't know. I know it's going to be a lot like another sci-fi property that's not coming to my head right now, but I would love to see like if that's really so cut and dry in their society.
Yeah.
Although Orange River did a recent little thing on the Bolians and how they're the ones who are there.
Yeah, they just are. I want to know more about the Bolians and like, do they take like massive shits or something? Because there's always these little references to like, oh, they find human plumbing inadequate and things like that.
I mean, they could have done that during the very short treks. It was the right kind of humor. If they want to do an episode about bullying and pooping, like, it would have fit in there pretty good. Tell me I'm wrong.
When did this come up? When did that line get in there? Oh my God. Is this like a Lower Decks thing or?
No, every time they talk about the Bolians, they talk about how like they destroy septic systems and Yeah,
there's been a couple just little things that lead you to believe that like they're either pea acid or shit grease or something. I don't know.
Eat lightning and crap thunder.
All I want to know is, where is their barber school? How do they train for that when
with no hair?
All those bullying barbers. Yeah, heck with it. Let's go back to
vacation to what is their planet called? Bolia?
Boleus.
So I come to a free vacation on Boleus, get a free haircut. You know, like send you to dental schools if you can't afford a real dentist.
Like
I can see like people getting free trips to Boleus in order to get a haircut.
I've never seen hair, but I know exactly how to cut it. Like, that's just wild to me.
It's amazing. Okay, in an effort to get this thing off the ticker, which I wrote, you got any more questions? Anyone about this episode in particular?
I'm gonna just jump the gun, and I'm gonna say this was about as tepid a 5 as I think you can find in Star Trek. Like, it was not a bad episode. I wasn't like beating my head against a wall, but I wasn't rooting for anybody either. And yeah, I'm Del 5. That's it.
I'm just getting to the rankings. So.
Del 5 alive.
Yes.
I thought that, like, I mean,
What's
there was also that interaction between Chapel and Spock that I think we did. Like, there wasn't much there. It was sort of like, I don't want to tell anybody about us kind of conversation while they're playing 3D chess.
Right.
Here's a question, and this is kind of off topic, but like, is 3D chess even playable?
So
I would love to learn.
Nathan
Yes, it is.
says that he actually knows how to play it and like has a video, I guess, on it or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just thought, like, this is a very, I guess at that stage in their relationship, it would sort of make sense not to be public about it because they're still sort of feeling each other out. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's sort of like, it's like, at that point, you sort of have hope that they're sort of gonna, not that they need to announce it, but not keep it a secret necessarily. But like, it just sort of is sad that becomes, I'm never gonna bring it up, and then it becomes, I don't really even want to be with you. It's sad to know like what's ahead.
Well, he's initiating a human, like some sort of relationship with someone who doesn't do relationships. And so he keeps trying to normalize it, whereas she keeps trying to leave it vague and open-ended, and maybe we're just us. To me, that's usually a red flag. If you can't, after like a certain amount of dates, if you're not calling me like your partner, your boyfriend, your whatever, then I'm starting to get sus, unless that was the agreement from the get-go.
Right. Are you good? Like,
Yes.
it's like you could kind of force the conversation, like, what are we to each other? But it's like, if there's this vague, this consistently, and wink at you from across the bar as a form of intimacy, at that point, it's like, dude, that's where his emotions override his logic, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to that point, how much time have they had to figure out what they are? Because she up and kissed him at the end of the last episode before this. So I don't know exactly how long this relationship has been a thing.
Mhm.
Maybe it isn't long enough for them to go public about it, and maybe they just have vastly different ideas of what their relationship should be.
Well, up to this point, like, their emotions towards each other are pretty intense. So it was sort of like, yeah, it might have been their first kiss, but they've been harboring these feelings for a really long time. So they've had an emotional relationship that led to a physical relationship versus like a physical relationship that led to an emotional one. So I would think, like, even though it was sort of like a tipping point, that kiss, I would think it's like, you would almost want to know, like, immediately after, like, what are we doing? You know, we've had such intense feelings towards each other and sort of like avoiding it and being awkward, and now we're like acting on it. So what are we going to do? You know, so I actually think what he's doing is pretty reasonable, but he's not listening. He's not paying attention.
Fair.
So
Okay.
what would you actually give this episode?
Oh,
Yeah, what he said.
I think, yeah, 5. It's middling. It just sort of like checks in emotionally with the characters, and the A plot is super weak.
Fair.
And I do like Bruce Horak in it. That's nice to see him again. I like the idea that he's like building all these YouTube videos for her in the future. Like, because it really shows like how much he actually really loved her. He was gruff, but he loved her.
I want to just double back really quick. Pelia and Una is why I liked this episode. I liked the whole backstory with Una getting a C and actually knowing who Pelia was and Pelia remembering her. I mean, obviously, I took on the name Space Hippie this week because as soon as I heard it in this episode, I was like, that's going to be my name on Sunday. But yeah, I did love this interaction of like, I know who you are. Do you know who I am? do you really know who I am? And that sort of like tension between the two of them, especially there's a shot where they're coming back from the refinery and Pelia's on like way one side of the ship. And then there's like the whole ship and then Una's on the other side. Like just visually, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. What do you think, Dustin?
I'm not going to be quite so generous here. I mean, I'm going to give it a 4. It's got great moments, but it's not a great plot overall. I mean, tacking on the moment with Kirk and Spock probably honestly brings it up from a 3, because that is like, oh, well, that was pretty cool. But otherwise, I didn't really enjoy this one. And if I have to rank it just against all other Strange New Worlds, it's like a 2. It's only okay.
Like all the ingredients are there for something much better than this, and it's disappointing that it fell short.
Trek's best Halloween episode, which, like I was saying, with Cat's Paw and the few others that we have to choose from aren't very good. This is still way better than any of them. So
you're also forgetting Sub Rosa is a Halloween episode, right?
Technically, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's another one that's like right at the bottom of all of Trek.
Right. Okay, comes back around to me, and I'm gonna go with 6. It's a perfectly serviceable episode, although probably not one I would immediately jump to if I wanted to watch a Trek episode or even a Strange New World episode again. I can get behind the dynamic between the Kirk brothers because I have a brother. I do believe that this first meeting between Kirk and Spock was perfectly played, not looked at as an epic moment, the turning point in the history of the world or the galaxy. And there were a few other moments, like Hammer YouTube, yeah. And I'd kind of forgotten the whole thing between Una and Pelia, but it works. 5.3. Okay. So yeah, that's what I'm going with.
Cool. Yeah. Just so everybody's aware here before we wrap up and maybe make some final thoughts. We're going to change our order of doing the reviews on these episodes. We were going to go in order, and then we realized next week is just after Thanksgiving, and a lot of us have got stuff to do, aren't going to be available. Probably you viewers don't want to come either. So where that was going to be Those Old Scientists, arguably the best episode of Strange New Worlds yet, we want to get as many people to be able to talk about it and for you guys to be able to tune in live and chat with us about. So we're going to flip and do Under the Cloak of War next week, and then we'll do Those Old Scientists the week after. I believe that's the 3rd of December. So yeah.
All right. Good to know. Does anybody else have anything else? Anything? Okay. In this case, I'm going to try and remember how to close this out. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and hopefully
Wait,
we'll
Scott,
see. What?
Scott, I did have one question before we left. How are you doing?
How was that climb of the Black Mountain?
It's really freaking treacherous. They don't give you any gear for it, and there's not really like a path. It's almost like freehand climbing.
Do you have to do it in Crocs?
No, thank goodness.
Was your experience more similar to the description from Shax or what we saw from Boimler?
It's kind of a mixture of both in there, because I know Shax didn't see the koala, but I did, and Boimler didn't have to climb the mountain, but I did. There's old Steve.
Well, thanks for taking a moopsie to the face for us, buddy. We appreciate that.
Yeah. Feel a little better now, Doc waved a light over it. That being said, thanks everybody for coming around for this episode, and hopefully we'll see you all next week. Same bat time, same YouTube channel. And as Dustin said, we'll be discussing Under the Cloak of War. But until next time, live long.